for example, when we talk about the Surrogacy Act in the context of India, it is now banned, and we only have altruistic surrogacy in practice, or we have ART. Now, within the domain of health humanities, this is a very iconic shift. And why did this shift happen? Because when the researches were being conducted around surrogates, the empirical data suggested that there was huge amount of exploitation that was happening. If you see a film like Mimi, that also is a very good reflection of why certain policies come into force as they come. So you cannot do away completely without the social reality of the literary reflection that you are kind of taking up. So hence that becomes very imperative when we take up feminist research, and with particular reference to literary texts or films or media or the kind of research that we do. What else does it do? It collectively recognizes the importance of women's lived experience in unveiling marginalized knowledge. Now, what do you mean by when I say the lived experience of unveiling marginalized knowledge? Many times, and here is where intersectionality comes into play, many times we do not take into consideration other aspects, like, say, for example, the aspect of education, the aspect of information, the aspect of geographical location, these. So what we try to do when we take up issues related to women, we make a very broad category. Like, say, for example, when we talk about gender-based violence, we take a very broad category of GBV. However, when we start decoding GBV, we find that not only the violence per se, but also in the circumstances through which women have experienced that violence also becomes prominent. Say, for example, if I bring in there is one paper I wrote on a comparison between the Delhi Nirbhaya case and the Hathras rape case. And I remember seeing it from the perspective of geographical location. Why, despite being almost similar kind of gender-based violence, garner different kind of media attention. The response was different. The reflections were different, primarily because of the geographical location. I mean, it was Delhi and it was Hathras. So the rural versus urban dynamics cannot be unruled while taking up the lived experience of women. So we have to take into consideration that aspect as well. Now, when we engage in a shift from the margin to the center, feminist thinking dismantles dominant knowledge forms and boundaries. And what does it do? It reformulates, or rather customizes how is built. So when I talk about education, when I talk about information, or for that matter, sometimes the language in itself. So especially in the context of India, we do not talk about language as an intersection, which is extremely important. Like, I mean, the ability to communicate certain things in the language that people understand is also a dominant form of knowledge production. We often do not take those considerations into how that is established within the course of literature. So that also has to be taken into consideration when we reformulate who can be knower and what can be known. And of course, when we talk about these issues, you take up the insider and outsider perspectives, navigating multiple standpoints and identities simultaneously. Most of the times, you will see that the policy are made by people who have not had the lived realities. Very many examples I'll give you, and one particular example that I have noticed after my stint. I mean, I was in Edinburgh last year, and I remember there was a very famous professor who was doing her research on Period Act in Scotland, and she pointed out that in that particular place I mean, it did not have sanitary pads in the bathroom, assuming that there would be no emergency of that kind. And I remember going to IIT Guwahati or some place, I don't remember, and seeing even a shaving kit and toothbrush and everything, but a sanitary pad missing, clearly indicating that probably these spaces are only meant for sort of, I mean, they do not directly say, but yes, not taking into consideration these aspects, sort of indicate that there has to be a shift in terms of who is making the policy and for whom. So clearly, men were not part, and women were not part of the tool making kit when this was decided. So smaller little things, but very prominent in terms of showcasing what they want to showcase. So that is why we talk about multidisciplinary perspectives, because here is where you uh, take a shift from a very linear standpoint and bring in very diverse perspectives from which you see a particular issue. So if disciplines, if you see history, philosophy, psychology, sociology, women's studies, law, literature, film and performance theory, all of them have a very solid feminist perspective as a framework for examining the process of inquiry within its social, historical, and political context. Of course, I do not mention here economics, but you will see that in all kinds of research across humanities and social sciences, economics has a very uh, underlying current, and you cannot just take away at that aspect at any point of time. So by so it's very important that in today's time, when you look at an issue of literature or a point of contention in literature from one point of view, you simultaneously take different aspects of what it has emerged from and where it is going, and put it all together, and that kind of gives you a rather broader perspective than just kind of having a very myopic understanding. And that's why probably the multidisciplinary shift is taking place. If you see, language as an entity was considered to be very isolated, and only probably people from literature and linguistics were doing research in language. It did not have much role in different other subjects. But over a period of time, NLP, natural language processing, as a domain in computer science grew like never before, especially with the coming of AI and all. You find that the language is utilized or researched more in computer science than probably in linguistics, or there is a kind of a collaboration that's happening. So of course, when we take up these multidisciplinary perspectives on feminist research, they not only engage but add a vantage point that is otherwise missing from that research. The first aspect that I take up is feminist health studies. Health humanities in India is growing exponentially. My own students have researched on surrogacy, ART, gerontology, abortion, sex selective abortion. So many aspects of how a health condition has become a dominant course of, uh, I mean, sh- shifting narratives within the domain of literature, and how they have uh, inspired many aspects from the social context. So what does feminist health studies do? They explore the influence of societal norms and power dynamics on gender health disparities. A very classic example could be how women treat themselves when they are unwell, and how men usually are taken care of when they are unwell. I deliberately choose these two different ways of expressing the same illness, but how I use my language is very different for how I use it for a man and how I use it for a woman. And why do I do that? Because in most of cases, if you look at the filmic representation or the media representation, you will find that there is a shift. So when even woman is unwell, she is cooking, she's looking after everything. It shows that there is a kind of a power dynamics which is there. And how has this influenced this kind of issue? Because it is happening in society. It also engages with policies and procedures associated with reproductive health, contraception, abortion, and maternal health care. There are several short stories that I have read which talk about how the decision to have a child is not solely dependent upon the people who are engaged in that marriage, but a kind of decision taken by others in the family. Also, in terms of how healthcare systems are characterized, they also I mean, have a very different kind of equity, inclusivity, and responsiveness to the varied needs and experiences of women. So, when we talk about healthcare or caregiving, usually it is said to be the responsibility of the women of the house. A very good example that I can give from my own research is an in-depth qualitative investigation into the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on maternal health services in specific states of India. So not only you saw that there are several examples that can be given from COVID-19 pandemic, which was neutral. So when we talk about the pandemic in itself, it was very neutral. But there are several intersections that can go into play when we look at the impact of COVID-19. Like, can we do away with how class operated within the COVID-19 pandemic? I mean, how many times do we take that into consideration? Or for that matter, the gender question. Like, so many times, I mean, if you see the newspapers at that point of time, because I wrote a project at that point of time, and I received one from ICSSR, a short-term 9-month project which talked about domestic violence, especially in the context of Bihar at that point of time. So you see that there were so many, one particular report I remember which talked about so many women losing their jobs. And that was primarily because before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a defined timeline as to when these women will be giving their when they will be doing their duty, office duty, their office hours. But when COVID-19 pandemic happened, they were forced to kind of have a 24-hour shift of not only their job but also their personal life, which took a toll surely on their professional life, and so many women lost their jobs. So can we not take into consideration all these aspects, or different kind of health infrastructure? So if, say for example, I remember so many trains coming from Pune and Madras, all these Chennai, and filled with people, and where women were not having bathrooms, they did not have any arrangement in terms of how they will respond to their menstruation and things like that, or pregnancy. People, there were no vehicles to take them. So yes, when we take into consideration a particular health condition, we also have to take into consideration the kind of resources that are there, information and resources, not only in terms of infrastructure but also in terms of information. So in feminist health studies, these are some of the aspects that we can talk about. Any aspect you take, you do not uh, uh, isolate it only as a literary reflection. You have to take into consideration the social realities of different demographies and how those demographies have responded to that particular health uh, 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 event, and how women have experienced that. Like, say for example, growing old is different from growing uh, I mean growing for women and men differently. I remember there is just one question in my question paper. I saw a particular image on some social media platform, and I gave it to students for an interpretation. I remember there was a woman who was smoking a cigarette, and there was a man who was smoking a cigarette. On the woman's side, it said "buri aurat," which means a bad woman, and on man's side, it said "buri adat," which was a bad habit. And I was compelled to think aloud that how did this shift happen? The same thing, but how society is responding to this whole idea of smoking is very different. So we have to take into consideration the socio-cultural context when we take up the feminist health studies aspect. Now, geography, I spoke about one of the intersections as geography. And when we talk about geography and the geographies of not only the body and identity, because usually geography is related to the body and identity. Where are you from? You speak about so and so place, and our skin color, our bodily structure sometimes also defines the place from where we come from. So in India, when we travel, we will think that, oh, maybe, with the help of language, we will identify. Or sometimes, people will say that maybe you have a round face, you're from here, or like that. But beyond this, what else is important, that the geographies also contribute to the making of power, and they define the inequality manifested in spatial context. Like the let's take power supply for that matter, or water supply. The way in the same city, the slum areas will have a limited amount of water supply, or the power supply. But in the posh areas, you will find that the power and water is adequately supplied. So within the same geographical location, just by the intersection of uh, a place, you know that this place has limited resources and this place has adequate resources, and these resources kind of reflect the dynamics also, and they are very oriented towards power structure. Now, what else do you do? It also delves into how women interact and influence their surroundings, addressing inquiries about access, mobility, and environmental justice from a feminist perspective. One of the biggest environmental movements, Shipko movement, was started by women. I read that this was phenomenal, because when the whole when the jungle was being cut, and the corporate houses started moving towards the jungle, it was women who said no, and they kind of went ahead and said that if you cut these trees, you will have to first uh, i mean and you will have to first cut our bodies. And that to me was very cinematic, very picturesque, even in terms of reading it. And why do you think this became a phenomenal event in the environmental history or eco-criticism? Because uh, the movement was initiated by women. They saw the element of nature nurturing the society, and hence we take it forward from where geography also is sort of related to the feminist perspectives. So one of the examples we can give here is the strategies by which women in rural India are expanding their social spaces through patriarchal resistance, and analyze how these actions help in redefining their lived spaces. So I was doing this field work on a project that I'm doing, which is on digitizing Madhubani. And I remember going to a particular village and talking to one of the artists. And she says, and she did her PhD and everything after she got married. And she was telling me that. And I never imagined that this could be something significant to mention. I said, when did you realize that this has all paved the way you wanted to. And she said, the first time I got a letter which read my name on it, and the postman came looking for me and said, no, I want her signature because this letter is for her. At that point of time, I realized that whatever pains I had taken over a period of time was all worth it. So, there are small little events of patriarchal resistance. So, that was her way of resistance. She said, I refused to take up anybody's name on any of the platforms because I wanted to have an identity of my own. So you will see that all these uh, movements around economic independence, small scale industry, are primarily driven by not only economic independence but also sustainability, without any interference of all kinds. So at all, even in those villages, there were so many women who were drawing madhumani paintings, and at all point of time, if they were diverse in their experience, they were different in what they spoke in terms of how they have approached the painting. But one thing was common for all these women, that because they have economic independence, they have a say in what is happening within the fold of their family. So they are taking decisions on which properties to be bought, what is to be done, where are the kids going for education, uh, everything, So that has a lot to do with how geographical location also has played very vital role in deciding the feminist perspective on different aspects. Now, because they have access to resources, so if you go to that village, you will find that brush and paint and everything is sold everywhere. And we have to credit, despite being a village, because it is very, the position of that village is very central in terms of how one can access the roads, how one can access the trains. You cannot deny that. So the rural urban dynamics also play huge amount of role in terms of how feminist perspective will manifest itself in terms of not only literary reflection but also its empirical validation. FSTS is a very emerging area these days, and it examines the ways in which science and technology have been historically shaped by and have reinforced gender biases, and that in turn also reflects on the limitation of women in academic areas of medicine, biology, STEM, health, and sexuality studies. So there was an article I was reading on female participation in in society, in particularly with particular reference to STEM fields, and I realized that uh, the at the level of primary and secondary, there was almost equal participation. However, when it went to higher education, it became less. And in workforce participation, it decreased like anything, almost half or less than half. Also, if you look at the study conducted by UNESCO, it found that only 35% of STEM students in higher education in India were women. So I will give you a very good example of how this dynamics also you can relate with in your own kind of surrounding. So I remember in 2015, particularly, there was this class I went to, uh, and it was a class of 220 students in IIT Patna itself, and there was not a single girl in the entire class. So since 2007, I have been in IIT, and I remember I have never seen a class which was all boys. I have nothing against boys, but seeing a class like this as a academic, as a teacher, you also will agree that it can be slightly not just boys. Even if it is all girls class, you will not find it very uh, conducive to the eyes, because you have grown up in a society which is not about lacking of uh, I mean, you see all these people around you. India is a country of youth. So if there is a youth and you do not find them in your class, it is kind of traumatizing to the mind. And I remember it was a very problematic. So it was not that only I noticed it. There are so many other people who noticed this kind of a, I mean, shift. And I remember then, of course, later on, the supernumerary seats were conducted, because overall across IITs, there was a huge decline in terms of the female participation. I remember, I mean, at IIT Patna itself, we started going to different schools, government and non-government schools, especially inviting class 11 and class 12 students who were in the domain of mathematics, and showing them the labs, conducting some lectures for them, so that, and offering them help in terms of guidance and stuff like that, because we wanted them to be motivated towards taking up engineering as a discipline of study, and not go just by doing some other by choosing some other field. We wanted them to be in engineering if they were good, because we thought that this was our way of contributing to the mission of sort of equality within the domain of STEM. So it definitely helped, because now you will see that you cannot go to a class which does not have a lot of participation of girls. So about 23% enrollment has happened for girl students also. So when we take up these aspects, we have to take into account that yes, scientific inventions are neutral, but how they are approached is very different. So if you see a mixer grinder advertisement, you will always find a woman doing that usually, but all the big chefs are men mostly. So how do you kind of see the disparity between the home, and when it becomes a profession, it is entirely thanks to all these YouTube channels and Instagram and all kinds of places where women have also found their equals footage in terms of uh, shifting the way science and technology has kind of gone ahead and steeped into our social and cultural fabric. Cyborg feminism is another very important area of inquiry when we talk about feminist research methodology, and the area that can be taken up, which explores intersections between biology, science fiction, and futurism, and the relationship amongst animals and nature. It also recognizes the agency of female individuals as they navigate and influence technological spaces. Primarily, when we look at the cyborg feminism, it takes or it scrutinizes various forms of gendered resistance and empowerment within environment shaped by technology. Now, technology, as we know, is usually supposed to be gender neutral, but what happens when there is a gendered perspective attached to technology? Like, say, for example, uh, if our research wants to assess whether there is a shift in the portrayal of female cyborgs, drawing upon Donna Haraway's cyborg metaphor within contemporary science fiction film, we can take up a detailed analysis of Blade Runner 2049, which was published in 2017, or Ex Machina, which was published in 2015, and determine whether this shift aligns within the tenets of cyber feminist discourse. So the cyborgs in both these texts, if you kind of look at, you will find that there has been a shift depending on how the response that was generated by society to the particular. So if you see a film like तेरी बातों में ऐसा उलझा जिया, I saw recently, and imagining a robo with human emotions was something beyond what we had thought. But you see the human capacity of reinventing technology. So those, when you take up that kind of an invention, you cannot deny that because science has advanced so much, you attach so much meaning to even a technological innovation like a robo. So something like that. Similarly, when we take up the area of feminist psychology, so all these areas that I am talking about are a brief snippet of what can be done possibly in this particular field. This fields expand. So, what I am kind of discussing here is the newer issues that have emerged in feminist research and are still very much unexplored within the domain of India's academic space. So, when we talk about feminist psychology, we take up the impact of gender roles, power dynamics, and social structures on women's psychological experience. Say, for example, if you take up the issue of dignity vis-a-vis women, this was not much thought about before the 2005 Domestic Violence Act. So, if you see the prohibition of Domestic Violence Act, which came out in 2005, the kind of films that came were only reflecting more on the physical aspect of domestic violence. So there was this bride burning, there was beating up and things like that. But if you see films that have come after, they explore very new dimensions. A film like Thappad, for example, generated very mixed response because, I mean, of course, of the gender roles, but it was all about dignity within the space of marriage. And if you see, there were many small videos that came after that film, which and also, some podcast which talked about what was most important in the institution of marriage, or for that matter any relationship or any equation. And they all talked about respect, because dignity, the whole idea of dignitarian feminism is also there. If you read Orit Kamir, you will find that the aspect of dignity became a very important discourse vis-a-vis the experiences of women and the role that is defined for them. So it also explores the psychological repercussions arising from different types of violence, including domestic violence, sexual assault, and different types of harassment. And this has a lot to do with examining power imbalances, feminist psychology, contributing to the efforts aimed at fostering equality and justice. Now, there is one more example that I think it's important that I give here. If you see about the discourse of uh, looking after children, it was usually only around the responsibilities of women. So the whole politics of only mother can look the child better. I mean, this is not scientifically correct that only mother can look the child correct. But over a period of time, this kind of perception that only a woman can look, only the mother can look after the child better, what has it done? It has made so many women compromise on their careers, compromise on what they wanted to do in life. I mean, I don't say, so many times it is not a choice that they make, they are coerced to make that choice, so so all those psychological aspects also do not, uh, they have to be taken into consideration when the research is kind of going on. So when we say, one example that I can kind of give here is the exploration of impact of gender equality issues like one stop centers, Beti Bachao Beti Padhao, on women's well-being and mental health in India. So there was a small pilot study that we were kind of doing on Beti Badhao, I mean, Padhao, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and we kind of got so many data around this, in which we saw that many young girls I mean, were not allowed to go to school primarily because who will look after the young kids back home? Because the mother has also gone to earn, the father has also gone to earn, but then there are kids. Or for that matter, sometimes when they are menstruating, they will not, they will have to, be at home because there are no sanitary pads and things like that. So, there are so many, and that in turn gives them a feeling that probably there's something lacking in them. So, one issue, but it impacts so many aspects of how women operate within that society, and how there are certain, I mean, say for example, when we talk about menstruation, it has nothing to do with a shame or stigma, but how it has operated over a period of time. It has been tagged along with the idea of shame and stigma. So we cannot do away with that as well. So when we take up research on these aspects, we have to attach certain intersections like stigma and shame and cultural construction of a particular uh, aspect of health, and then take it up. Then we have feminist sociology. This, of course, is very well researched area, but I just thought I'll take up because this encompasses a broader picture of how gender intersects with power relations and larger sociocultural institutions, codes, and practice. And when we take up this aspect of feminist sociology, it looks at systematic oppression of women by men globally, including social practices like heteronormativity and patriarchy. And if you see the one very classic example could be the Me Too movement, and how it impacted uh, women across geographies, and how uh, immediately there was a book by Alka Kurian and Sonora Jha, who talked about that. I mean, Alka Kurian's article on Me Too being the fourth wave of feminism became extremely uh, trending and popular, and gave so many insights on how this whole digital activism was the new way of, or the new wave of feminism in the context of the world, and not just one particular geographical location. So in this particular inquiry of feminist sociology, you find that sociologists have actively participated in activism, bridging the gap between academic research and real world advocacy. So this kind of research is not only related to uh, academics. It also advocates certain kind of activism through policy making, through awareness programs, through some kind of activism, to say the least. So one example that you can take up is the study aims to make a systematic inquiry to understand the social issues and challenges faced by employed mothers in everyday life, and how they balance their careers and childcare activities in select states in India. And I remember a very famous celebrity asking this. I think it was Sushmita Sen or somebody who said, "I am still to come across a situation in which a man is asked this question of how he balances his career and childcare activities, while women are often asked these kind of questions: how do you balance, how do you balance?" And this is problematic because this has to be this is of course studied also now. There are so many empirical research that are going on into how women have this guilt feeling, uh, especially pertaining to the kind of they've not looked into the child and things like that. And that is why probably there is a shift in terms of how taking care of the children at home is not gender specific. It can also be done by men, and there is where the idea of whole partnership is now seeped into also a very patriarchal country like India, where nobody is, or very less people are talking about very conditioned gender roles when it comes to looking after the house. So if you see on Instagram or YouTube, You will find that the men are also washing the dishes, and they are also cleaning the house, and all sort of things are happening. Even the advertisements, aerial advertisement, I saw that it talked about it showed a man putting clothes in the washing machine and drying it up, things like that. Advertisement of wheel. So many things that are uh, reflective of the contemporary realities or contemporary transitioning realities are part of feminist sociology. So if you see maybe 10 advertisements, if you analyze 10 advertisements on say dishwashing or washing clothes, you will find that there has been a shift after the digital space came. Or maybe if you see the COVID-19 pandemic as one of the markers, and if you see some advertisements before the COVID-19 pandemic and after the COVID-19 pandemic, you will find that there is a huge amount of shift in terms of how household chores were uh, perceived earlier, and the kind of transition that has happened post COVID-19 pandemic. Also, we can take up anthropology, which again re-examines the claims made by earlier ethnographers and their male informants about the roles, values, and behavior of women. Like I said, most of the times these data around women is collected by men. So you cannot do away with the fact that there was a male bias, and there has to be a feminist reading of that qualitative data to revise that male biased interpretations of information that involve women. And that is why most of the times the research around women is encouraged to be taken up by women, because it somehow resonates with the whole uh, idea of lived realities. So one of the examples that can be here is when we talk about health related behaviors, they are frequently influenced by social factors, gender norms, ethnic considerations, political dynamics, and socioeconomic disparities. And say for example, like I was talking about caregiving. Now, in 8 out of 10 households, you will find that elderly parents are often looked by the daughter in law. It automatically becomes her responsibility. There is no pattern to it, but it is it is an assigned role that you are so and so you will be doing this, which is problematic because it clearly indicates that caregiving is the responsibility of the woman and not shared. So, this revision, when we take up a research like this, there is a kind of a revisionist agenda. And when these aspects come into play, they have the potential also to change the society. So, that is why probably if you see some of the films, uh, uh, they advocate that, I mean, it has to be a shared kind of a responsibility and not the responsibility of the woman of the house alone. Because caregiving is very, and that is why there was this article on uh, caregivers fatigue. So even despite all the love and affection you can have for the person you are caring for, it can take a toll on your mental and physical health if you do not have people to share the responsibilities with, because caregiving is not a phenomenon of 1 or 2 days. It takes some time, especially if it involves elderly people, people from dementia, people from Alzheimer, people from some kind of terminal illness, paralysis, or so many aspects. So it has to be a kind of a shared responsibility. So yeah, economics, like I said, again, a very significant intersection that we have to take into account while dealing with any kind of research in humanities and social sciences. I have a colleague here who once told me that at the core of all humanities and social sciences research lies economics. And I did not disagree with him, because then I started looking at my entire research through the economics point of view, and I realized, hey, yes, this is what he said was absolutely right, because at all points of time, any issue I picked up and I looked at the economic aspect of it, I found a newer dimension to kind of investigate that particular research. So feminist economies investigate the interrelationship between gender and economy, and it considers the uh, patriarchy and capitalism as interrelated forms of dominance. So when we say marginalized on the basis of caste, it is not like that. So I remember there was a talk I was talking to somebody, and she said that it happens in her caste, something related to that. And I said that it's probably not just the caste, sometimes it's more of the class. And I don't remember where I read that it said class is the new caste. So you cannot actually, when all these statements are made, one thing is very clear, that at the core of these discussions is the intent to take intersection into account. So no matter what you are taking, which research you are taking up, these intersections become very important. The idea of not only economics but also so just imagine a setup in which there is a man who is in a particular caste. Maybe he is not getting that kind of weightage, but if the class intervenes, probably the game is very different. So in a society which is very capitalist today, we cannot take away the importance of uh, economics. So maybe yes, somebody, a woman in a rural setting, she did not have any agency, but maybe in due course of time she started having her own money, she started running a business which became popular. Then of course she will have certain kind of agency which was not there earlier. So in this kind of research, you will always find that it engages with common dichotomies such as productive versus reproductive, paid, unpaid, public, private, to understand how it creates a gendered impact. Now, a very common example, if you see in filmic representations, also was about women not, I mean, homemakers as not doing much, though there was so much of work. And therefore, you see, there was so many articles that came out on how, because it was an unpaid labor, it went unrecognized. And the whole idea of, so I was reading also on women scientists, and they said that uh, when they when they have a child, there is a gap of 2 3 years. The science goes on, the scientific revolution goes on, but they are now lacking behind, and therefore it becomes very challenging for them to be productive and reproductive at the same time. So you know how women are represented in economics discipline, and how this impacts knowledge creation and policy recommendation is also to be taken into consideration when we talk about the feminist economics. And one of the examples that I can talk about here is explore income trajectories and disparities between genders. Additionally, the scrutiny of impact of human capital determinants, occupation positions, and cumulative disadvantage factors over time in elucidating the gender pay gap in India. And I remember there was some point of time I just we were having a discussion, and I told one of my students that, see, if Bihar has the lowest gender pay gap, and when we researched, we found that yes. And then he thought that why was I saying something like that, and I said, see, because of the poverty index, I thought that uh, this might be a hypothesis to work on, because this clearly indicates that there is less female participation. If females are also participation in contributing to the economy, that particular state will grow. So something like that. Then of course we have ecofeminism, which is I mean, which I think everybody has kind of heard of, who studies literature and otherwise also. And what ecofeminism does is it merges feminism and environmentalism, that contends the subordination of women and the decline of environmental result from patriarchal and capitalist systems, and it promotes the idea of the feminine principle as a remedy to environmental harm, emphasizing qualities that foster the well-being of nature. What one of the examples that we can take up is the analysis of the parallelisms between the analogous forms of oppression and domination, which result in the degradation of the lives of women and damaging of nature. In Rahul Verma's play Bhopal, we also have a very recent series on this. And if you watch or read this play, you will find that it kind of underlines the necessity to return to the feminine in terms of practice and knowledge to overcome the conjoined domination of the masculine, man over nature, and the feminine versus woman. So the idea of nature and nurture, which was conventionally attached to uh, women or feminine, that is that is seen in the contemporary light of environmentalism through a paradigmatic shift, where you associate the uh, nurturing of the nature within the domain of feminist analysis or ecofeminism. This is the last I talk about, which is again about the feminist legal studies, and it primarily is about how different decisions of law or different policies of law have brought in the shift not only in society but also in the reflection of how it has had its way in literature and films or media. So you will find that many I mean, when many judges, when they give their verdicts, or they say something, they will always use literature as one of the examples. They will have something to say from the literature. I remember hearing Justice Chandrachud speak once, and in a talk of 40 minutes, he quoted three Indian writers. And I was so overwhelmed by this idea of how literature has also impacted the way legal formations take place. So I gave you example of Domestic Violence Act. Similarly, many, like say for example, the idea of Sabrimala, bringing in the element of right to equality and no discrimination in front of the law. So all these aspects came into being because there were several short stories, novels, which were written beyond the idea of hygiene pertaining to menstruation. So I mean, the evolution of feminist legal theory was closely linked to the expansion of feminism, with early advocacy efforts focused on political rights, such as right to vote. We know this, but what it also did is that it intersected with social issues, thereby reinforcing, challenging the subordination of women, the perpetuation of patriarchy, and the existence of gender and sexual inequality. The very idea of POSH Act is an outcome of the efforts that were done by Bhavri Devi, and we cannot deny that. And therefore, when we examine issues like justice, reproductive rights, domestic violence, workplace discrimination, this particular aspect of feminist legal studies, despite its limitations, I mean, I don't say that there will be no limitations, but despite the limitations, it has had the impact on how uh, literature has been seen through those literary discourse, legal discourse, and how legal discourse, when they happened, have in turn shifted the feminist paradigm. So if you one example that I take up is the legal strategies to eliminate sex selective abortion in conjunction with feminist perspective on the issue, revealing the effectiveness and dynamics of institutional responses to sex selection in India. So one of the aspects could be this, where you know that law in 1994 PCP NDT Act, it is over, but still in practice, uh, because of various issues that are in the socio-cultural discourse of India, uh, it still is on. I remember I was speaking in King's College London, and I was constantly emphasizing on female infanticide, female feticide, and there was a professor who said, "Why don't you call it just feticide?" Uh, and then it made me rethink that I cannot call it feticide, because there are no male childs which are, I mean, meeting the destiny that a female fetus does. And then, of course, all this will find its reflection in literary and cinematic studies, where you know that feminist movements have impacted the reflection of an issue in literature and cinema, and vice versa is true. So if you take up uh, the, I mean, the literary discourse over a period of time, uh, especially in the especially post-colonial literature, and of course later on, you will find that they have been very instrumental in developing an intellectual and political feminist movement, aiming to critique male dominant language and provide resistant readings of literary text and histories. And even so, in cinematic studies, you will find that representation of women in popular cinema has always emphasized on the need for increased participation on women in key roles, positions within the film industry. One of the examples can be Chitra Divakarni's for short stories, which foreground a range of issues from dysfunctional marriage and abusive husbands. I remember reading one particular short story, which was all about this whole cultural aspect into the issue of marriage, and it's called The Doors. And if you read that particular short story, the contention between the husband and the husband who was an Indian, and the wife who was a migrant, not migrant, but NRI, I guess, or maybe immigrant. So they used to have this contention over sleeping the doors closed or open. So that door became an indicator of the shift, or the cultural conditioning of both of them, and how that became a contention. I was I mean I think it was a very new way of looking at the idea of privacy within the marriage. And I remember uh, somebody from a diasporic space only could write, because they had the experience of both the places. So I felt very nuanced uh, range of emotions and reflections that underwent in that particular short story. Some of the readings that you can possibly do is these which are there. I can also share these slides with Dr. Poonam, and maybe she can share with you. As a conclusion, I think I can only say that when you use multidisciplinary frameworks, you not only look at the feminist research from the way of making a consciousness raising, but also as a process of self-awareness familiar to those in women's movement and different disciplines. So if one issue is looked at from different issues, what it does is it shapes the present endeavors which have the potential to take up or influence the future developments that are yet to unfold. So it is the effort of the today that leads to the making of the tomorrow. And that is why probably it's very important to realize that these intersections that we talk about cannot be done without cannot be done, because earlier maybe it was okay to look at certain things from a critical point of view. But at this point of time, it's important that the way our society is being in that dynamic mode, different aspects go into the making of what we uh, examine or analyze in our research. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I don't know where to begin from because whatever you discussed, it was not just the theory, it was the personal experience which was put into the theory. I have so many like personal experience to share with you based upon the session which you have given, but as a host, I must give a chance to the participant. So I'm asking all the participants if they have any question, they can unmute and ask. If not, then I'll start. Okay, nobody is starting, ma'am. Then I, I have, like, I would like to book an appointment with you to discuss whatever you described in this session because there are just too many. Starting from the privacy, privacy is so underrated that if you seek it, people consider you as antisocial and on top of that, rude. Like it is like a trait which you should not have. Like you should not even ask for privacy. So that is the level of understanding, the feminist psychology which you discussed about. That is so deeply rooted, and I must say that your session on feminism, I'm so glad that masculine gender also heard it. Like it was for them more than us. And the psychology, ma'am, I would like to discuss a personal experience with you. A few years back, I went for a vacation with my siblings, and my act was not not praised in the sense, was not accepted by my own near and dear ones, by educated and uneducated strata of the society equally. And unanimously, I was asked just one question: how could you enjoy without your husband and kids? And I had no answer to this question because my very emotion of happiness was looked down upon, and I did not know how to justify it. I had no answer at all. And like few months before, I went for a residential workshop whereby I had to stay for a couple of nights. And in that situation, it was accepted because it was residential workshop related to my profession. But my husband was glorified, if I may say, worshipped for taking care of my kids in my absence, which I do it on the daily basis. And it goes, as you said in the anthropology, feminist anthropology, that we are the nurturer. It is what we are made to do. Like we are born to take care of the people, and it just go unnoticed, as in the patriarchy is so innate, it has so much ingrained in our bodily system that people do not even recognize that it is wrong, or like it shouldn't be the way it is happening. So I'm so happy, and I can't say I'm exhilarated by your session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Poonam. I think this goes on, and that's why probably it has to come into research. Because if it comes into research, not only through uh, literary and media reflections, uh, but also its empirical validation, what it does is that it establishes not as one story, not as an individual story, but as a collective story of many people. And I don't know if it is most of the times, if you ask me what I have read and I've seen, women become more adamant around these issues, like the you know elderly women especially. I found find women will ask these questions to you more than men. Yeah, how will you manage, how will you do this? Oh, you are so free. I think it's not about just I think the whole temperament of social sensitization is required, because it is so dominant in our system that you have to do this, you have to take up this job because you have to come back home at this point of time. If you do not come, like I remember I stay for a very long time in office, so I remember there was somebody who told me smarak banwana hai. So whereas I am doing what I love to do on a day to day basis, and it is not for some smarak that I'm aiming for, but how people respond to something that you are paid to do and you have to do, like, something you like. I like my profession. So it's very difficult to kind of gauge those spaces. So
I know,
yeah.
ma'am, the very, as you said, you like your profession. Your very liking would be questioned that how could you like your profession and not your other things which you are destined to take care of. So the very thinking is questioned by all around people. I'm not targeting, as you said, that the women. So I'm not targeting a gender, but it is targeted by everyone. The very thinking that how can you think like that? And then you start questioning yourself, maybe I'm thinking wrong, maybe I shouldn't think like that.
Yeah. No,
Again,
the
I'm
classic case
yes,
is
ma'am.
the film Thappad. See, the whole idea that there was a large section of society also applauding the film. You cannot take away the impact of the dignitarian way of looking at individuals, which is the contemporary mode of how society is operating. So you cannot take away those aspects of how it was responded, though there were two sections who responded to the film differently, but then there was one section which hugely applauded the element of dignity within the space of marriage, or for that matter any relationship, even friendships. I mean, if you do not have the element of friendship, respect, I think no equations can go on.
I totally agree, ma'am. I think I have heard Javed Akhtar saying that love goes, respect stays. So marry someone or be in a relationship with someone who respects you. Because more than love, that is what is required in any relationship, not only marriage, in any relationship.
Yeah, true.
I'm once again asking if anybody has any doubts, even if you can write in the
I,
chat box.
I'm just writing my email. I mean, not necessarily somebody might have a query right now, but even later on, if they have anything to write to me or ask me, I'm more than open to. Uh,
Good morning, ma'am. I'm
Good
Dr.
morning.
Mike. Yeah, I'm Dr. Michael from the same department. We all enjoyed your presentation. It's very interesting, and
Thank you.
also I strongly believe that we got a kind of guidelines to do research on do and guide research on feministic perspectives. I would like to know more about this marginalized knowledge. Can you define that, ma'am, something more? And in your
So,
presentation, the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that women's lived experiences in unveiling marginalized knowledge. Yeah, can you do?
so
Yeah.
yeah. So see what happened usually in the many empirical research. So I'm talking about the literary reflection and its validation with empirical data. What happened usually is that these empirical data were collected by uh, researchers who did not have any idea on how things work. Like, say, for example, if I am doing a research on uh, balancing career and home, I know that there is a little bit of that aspect that can go, that struggle that has also gone into my own mind. So when I go to the field, I corroborate, I collect the data and corroborate it with the lived experience of my own. Whereas somebody, a colleague of mine who has never experienced a man, for that matter, if he goes with a perspective that it's just a data collection for him. And therefore, this research or this feminist way of research emphasizes that there has to be a little tandem of lived realities, because otherwise the knowledge production that will happen will have a very marginalized perspective. I'll give you one example. I was once interviewing for a project, okay, and uh, in literature, you have many books that talk about feminist research methodology. One of the books that I have always referred to is Caroline Zoramaglu's feminist research methodology. And I remember I had mentioned that in the project. And when I was interviewed, there was this some senior professor who said, "What is feminist research methodology?" And I was stunned because I had read the book, and I said it talks about. So he said that no, it means that your approach to research is biased from the very beginning when you choose a feminist research methodology. And it made me think over and over again that where I went, I did not get the project, obviously, because according to him, my methodology in itself was wrong. But that was the way to go about. And then I decided no, probably because of the discipline that humanities and social sciences as a overall discipline, I think there is where the qualitative and quantitative will only work. And within those larger frameworks you can have your methodology, but not explicitly you can kind of go ahead and navigate into those spaces. So that is what I kind of mean, that knowledge produced by people who are not stakeholders, then
Mm.
the knowledge that is getting created is usually marginalized, and it lacks that stakeholders perspectives. So any
Okay.
kind of issues that are around women, we will be stakeholders in that.
Say,
So something like
yeah, good, ma'am, good, ma'am. Congratulations. And
that. Thank
maybe I got the point. Ma'am, one more doubt I have that. In your presentations, you have given Sabarimala as example. See that the faith of Sabarimala is beyond external evidence. And what the point, ma'am? Beyond the external evidence, the faith of Sabarimala issues. And see that in this particular point, how do we claim that it's particularly how do women claim it's a right of women to enter into that particular temple? This,
See, it's not. So, who built that faith system, and why were women excluded? That is what law questioned when when the appeal was made that women are denied because menstruating women are denied, or
mm,
women are denied entry into a temple. That is what that was what the plea was all about, and that is
mm.
what the court looked into. That faith is also man-made in the context of Sabrimala, and denying
Wait, ma'am.
somebody on the basis of something which is so natural. I mean, it's
Mm.
not unnatural, right? Menstruating women is not a natural, it's a natural phenomena. It's not that somebody injected or somebody you picked it up because of something else. It's a natural phenomena, just like men growing beard. So saying that men with beard will not go to temple because they have beard, it's like that. There can be certain restrictions, yes, but something that comes naturally to men and women, you cannot have discrimination on the basis of that is what law said when they gave the ruling.
But it's the societal construct because not only Sabarimala, but also some other religious places also, particularly genders are restricted. That we have to understand. It's fine, man. Answer is very appealing. It's interesting, ma'am. Ma'am, one more doubt. Shall I ask?
Mhm,
I don't know how to ask these questions. You know that because interesting topic that you covered that cyborg feminism.
mhm.
See, the Haraway says that cyborg is an illegitimate offspring of patriarchal capitalism. And here, how do the cyborg replace the place of particularly the work of women? And you mentioned that caregiving. Is it possible by a cyborg to care a child? Because it's a blend of human and animal.
No,
Cyborg is a blend of both,
what
machine and
I
animal.
what I meant by caregiving, of course, there is a lot of invention that is done. So I remember reading about a phenomena in Japan. See, the whole idea of CCTV when it began, it was meant to monitor people. Okay, but how? Just a second. So over a period of time, what happened in Japan, there was a study which has reflected that I don't see. Okay, okay. So turn camera on. I don't know what has happened here. What is the issue?
Ma'am, your camera is off.
Why?
I think
Okay, let it be. I don't know, maybe some issue. I can't
Ma'am,
see.
you are audible, but
Okay, yeah. So when I talk about this whole caregiving issue, I was talking about the context of Japan. So I was reading this article on the use of CCTVs. So earlier that article said that earlier children used to visit parents at least 6 months, in 6 months, 1 year, like that. But when CCTV came, the day-to-day familiarity of seeing your parents. Uh, I mean, evaded that visit. What happened in turn? There was this many cases in which the children discovered their parents' death because there was no movement in the CCTV for 2 days, 3 days. So a technology which was meant to sort of support people became a way of also marginalizing them. So in caregiving perspective, I felt technology played a role positively, but at the same time, this whole idea of uh, totally being dependent on technology became problematic. So something like that. Also, when I was talking about caregiving, I was seeing that if you see even around you, you will find that mostly it is the woman's responsibility, mostly.
yes, yes, ma'am.
So how do we decode that space? Because when we talk about caregiving, it is not that only women have to take care of. So the idea of academic discourse has to be deconstructed, in which there are so many roles that have to be assigned to not only one particular gender, but there has to be a kind of a gender neutrality, and that is what these ads are suggesting also. So if you see many ads, you will find that the man and woman both are taking care of the mother or the father. So if the daughter-in-law is bringing a cup of tea, the boy is helping them get up, he's giving the medicine. So it kind of becomes a joint activity, which is what is required now, is what I think is emphasized on in the contemporary times. Oh, now it's working.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Good. I feel to add one point, one more point here, ma'am. I see that in our university, almost all the classrooms and everywhere, there are many cameras are set. I can personally feel that it's a knowledge-based controlling mechanism because the authorities, particularly the power centers, that means the people who have the power, they want to control. And for that, they set the camera. It's related to the concept of Jeremy Bandham. It's a knowledge-based controlling mechanism, and people feel that see that we are marginalized. All the marginalized must be controlled and monitored. For that, it's very much used in our institutions. That's my
sir,
personal understanding.
I have a
Can,
camera at home. Sir, I have a
yeah,
camera at home
that's
just to see
different.
where my kids are.
No, no, it's a controlling mechanism. You want
Not
to control
controlling,
the
just to
world.
be assured if they are okay or what are they doing. So it's
Then
not
you
always control, it's like
the
assurance.
no, not in that way. See that you have the another meaning. If you think you get another point also, it's a knowledge-based controlling mechanism. And you take only one point, that is monitoring. You want to monitor where your children are, whether at home or at playground or some for
Not
that purpose.
monitor, be assured.
So you are taking that only that point. You want to good.
Yes, because I do
Yes,
not
yes.
monitor them. I just want
Sir,
to
it
be
is
assured.
not
Yeah.
only for monitor, it is for safety purpose. We can work peacefully here.
See,
Okay, we
I
can
think
generate
I
some.
have a better, I think I have one intervention there which probably can resolve this issue, Dr. Michael. I think society is changing. So if you remember your own childhood, or if I remember my own childhood, all my summer vacations were at my grandmother's place. All summer vacations. I have never done that with my own child. Nobody does that with their children. But why? Because the society shifted. There was
Yes,
a
ma'am.
transformation in society, And there was so many home. I think just the other day a student of mine shared an article which said 85,000 women across the world have died because of domestic violence. And home, it's an article published in the Guardian. It talks about home being the most unsafe place. So the whole idea, when I think I was growing up, this place of uncles and aunties were considered to be very safe. Over a period of time, there were many researches that were done on the idea of some kind of you know uh, violence, or uh, molestation or sexual kind of experience, which was primarily indicative that this has come from close people. And that shifted the ways in which parents started protecting their own children. Also, you cannot deny the setup, which transitioned from a large setup, the joint family setup, to individual setup. So society changed, and so did the perspective of people changed. So like when they talk about CCTV camera, more than monitoring, it's about safety, because they keep on sometimes seeing their child in, because of course they are here, we are hearing so many things around us pertaining to young kids. So naturally it's a kind of a defensive mechanism or a protective mechanism to to do so, than just kind of, I think monitoring may not be the right word to use, but from primarily a kind of a safety mechanism, that okay, though nothing much can be done even there, but yes, just having a camera at home, yes, restricts a lot of issues. Like somebody knows, okay, there is a camera here and things like that. Yeah. So maybe like that. And in setup like ours, the CCTV is primarily, it's a huge setup. So if there is a technology, why not use it? The problem is when they you only monitored you, then it's a problem. But if they're monitoring everybody, then it's, I don't think
And
it's a
it,
problem.
yeah, everybody,
It's primarily the quality control and things like that.
everybody can generate the meaning based on their requirement. But I
Yes,
personally feel that the first point, the priority is controlling mechanism, then rest of the points can be applied. Congratulations, ma'am.
absolutely.
Personally, I enjoyed the very much. I think we all, uh, it's interesting. Thank
Thank
you,
you
ma'am.
so much. Thank
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much, ma'am. We extend our sincere gratitude to you for your insightful session on feminist research methodologies, intersectionality, and inclusion. Your deep insights into application of feminism methodologies in research have given us a valuable perspective on promoting inclusivity and intersectionality in academic studies. Thank you so much for your time and expertise, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Poonam, once again for inviting me and making me part of your FDP. Uh, SRM is very dear to me, and so are you all. Thank you so much once again. I
Thank
look
you, ma'am.
forward to meeting some of you in due course of time. I thank all the participants of this particular FDP for being there, and look forward to meeting some of you over a cup of tea sometime.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much,
Excuse me,
ma'am.
ma'am.
അതെ അതെ അതിന്റെ ഭാഗമല്ല ഇത്, അതിന്റെ ഭാഗമല്ല, അതിന്റെ കൂടെ ഉള്ളത് ഇപ്പൊ റിവൈസ്ഡ് ഇതിന്റെ ഇതാണ് അത് വരുന്നത്.
Okay, I'm
Excuse
leaving.
me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Someone is asking a question, I think. Someone is
I'm sorry. Ma'am, can I ask a doubt? Is it
Yeah.
okay? Yeah, thank you,
You
ma'am.
can
So,
write to me. It's already 11:30. I think I need to go.
okay.
If it is something very quick, then you can.
No, it's just that, what's your perspective on female aging in Indian context, ma'am? Like,
Mhm.
it always has an intersectional approach to it, like being poor, old, female, being an
Absolutely.
widow, elderly
Absolutely.
widow.
I did a research on Bastuhara Nari in Varanasi, and I went to so many old age homes. So mostly it was very interesting to find out two things. One, that there were many women who came from Bengal, and I was surprised with this unless and until I would have gone there. Maybe if I go to places like Mathura, maybe I'll find something else. But in Varanasi, we primarily found a dominance of Bengal and UP. Some women were there. So is it to do with only the regional geographical dynamics? But Bihar was missing. So how do these intersections take place? I don't know. Then of course the mental health issues were there. Then young and old, I mean, that dynamics also play a role in aging. Most of these women were aged, and they did not have any money. So yes, class, age, geography, all these I mean, they were mostly uneducated. They did not have any education. So do you in aging, all these contribute, all these factors had also contributed. So yeah, in aging, those things also have to be taken into consideration. I remember my student, she went for an old age home in Kolkata, and she said it was an amazing old age home, and I had never heard somebody talking about old age home like that. And she said, oh, when I went to that old age home, there were some people who were playing cards, and their beds were nice, and I was amazed. I said, book a seat for me. So even old age homes will have different kind of respondents depending on the class affiliations that you come from. So yes, aging is not same for everybody, despite it is same, just like death. Some people die just on roads, nobody takes care of them, and some are burned with sandalwoods. Death is same for everybody, but the treatment of death is different. So yes, same as aging.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Poonam, I'll take your leave then.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your
Oh,
time.
thank you so much. Okay, bye bye.
Bye, ma'am. A heartfelt thank you to all the participants for your active engagement and thoughtful contribution throughout the session. Your involvement truly enriches the discussion and learning. As we conclude this session, we look forward to seeing you again at 2 p.m. for the 10th session of the Faculty Development Program. Have a wonderful break and see you soon.